This week on Africa Update, junta spree in Africa as Burkina Faso comes under the gun in latest coup. Ethiopia's cabinet approves lifting of state of emergency. Cameroon stadium stampede kills at least 8, government says. Plus, UAE to lift entry transit ban on passengers from 12 African countries. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Africa Update, where we review stories from across the African continent. I am Ayubelia. Thank you for joining. We begin in Burkina Faso, where soldiers in the country announced on state television that they have seized power in the West African country following a mutiny over the civilian president's failure to contain an Islamist insurgency. A junior officer announced the suspension of the constitution, the dissolution of the government and parliament, and the closure of the country's borders, reading from a statement signed by Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henry Damiba. He said the new patriotic movement for preservation and restoration will re-establish constitutional order within a reasonable time, adding that a nationwide nightly curfew will be enforced. Hundreds of people gathered to celebrate the military coup in Ouagadougou, welcoming soldiers, hanging car horns and waving the national flag.
Le MPSR rassure également les partenaires et amis du Burkina Faso quant à la ferme volonté de notre pays de continuer à respecter ses engagements internationaux, notamment en matière des droits de l'homme.
Burkina Faso's President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore has been detained by mutinying soldiers, security officials said, with troops leading the apparent coup, saying his government failed to support them during the country's years-long conflict with armed groups. According to reports, heavy gunfire was also heard near Kabore's residence in the capital, Ouagadougou. Several armored vehicles from the presidential fleet, riddled with bullets, could be seen near the residence. One was spotted with blood. A Twitter post from Kabore's account called on those who had taken up arms to lay them down. It could not be verified if Kabore was the author. Two security sources and a Western African diplomat told Reuters news agency that Kabore was detained at a military camp. Meanwhile, the West African regional bloc known as ECOWAS, which already has suspended Mali and Guinea in the past 18 months over military takeovers, condemned what it called an attempted coup in Burkina Faso and said it held the military responsible for the physical well-being of President Kabore. African Union Commission Chief Moussa Faki Mahamat also condemned the attempted coup d'etat against the democratically elected president in Burkina Faso in a statement. The Western powers denounced what they called an attempted coup, and the EU demanded the immediate release of President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore. The United States also called for Kabore's release and urged members of the security forces to respect Burkina Faso's constitution and civilian leadership. UN Chief Antonio Guterres said in a statement he strongly condemns any attempted takeover of government by the force of arms, calling events a coup. Let's now join Wing Commander Musa Salmanu, retired former UN military observer in the Republic of Congo, to give us perspectives on this. Hello, Musa. Welcome to the program. All right, let's get perspectives on these recent happenings. There's been coups all over the continent. Now, we are being joined by Wing Commander Musa Salmanu, retired, former expert on mission, United Nations expert on mission. Hello, thank you for joining us at the moment for the Africa Update.
Thank you so much, Ayuba. Thank you for having me. Good afternoon, viewers.
Well, it appears that the Green Boys are out of the barracks. I mean, we've been having these stories of coups. In 2021 alone, we had about 4 coups taking place in different African countries: Chad, Mali, Guinea, and Sudan. Now, recently, we are seeing that Burkina Faso is joining that league. What exactly is going on, in your opinion?
So, if you look at the scenario or in the places that you've called, if we focus on the West African sub-region, where we belong, you find out that most of, or if not all, the coups that you have called are happening in almost the same circumstances. You find out that these are issues that have to do with insecurity. I mean, that's what the coupists say immediately they come on board. And they have shown situations where, for example, they allege that the governments they were toppling did not do much about the insecurities bedeviling their various countries.
Well, but again, one will wonder, is democracy failing? Because in most of these instances, you see civilians rejoicing whenever there's a takeover, you know, in that manner. So is democracy failing, really?
Well, I wouldn't say democracy is failing. Perhaps the way we practice, or the Democrats in this part of the world are failing. Democracy itself, or how we view democracy, is such that it's a destination rather than, or an end in itself, rather than a means to an end. Democracy by nature is supposed to be a participatory government. It's supposed to be a government that responds to the yearnings of the people. It's a government that has clear rules of engagement and so on. So you find out that in some of those instances, for self-serving purposes or reasons, those that have been there have gone beyond, or have actually not looked at democracy or democratic principles or democratic rules of engagement, if I'll call them, and stick by them. For example, democracy is all about good governance. Democracy is all about inclusiveness. Democracy is all about giving power back to the people, and therefore, in these instances, ensuring that people feel the presence of government, the kind of social contract that exists between government, or the leaders, or government in its entirety, and the citizen. Now you find out that in a lot of these countries, the leaders, even though democratically elected, do not exemplify that, or do not pursue that purpose for which democracy is meant for. So democracy in itself is working, is good, but the Democrats in this part of the world need to do a kind of soul searching to ensure that democracy delivers on its promises. So we're having a situation whereby the promises of democracy are not being delivered, and people are getting frustrated.
So what's the most common dominant denominator here in some of these African countries? You have served in the Republic of Congo under the United Nations peacekeeping mission. So what have you, observed over the years? There's always this pointing of the fact that there is this rise in terrorism in the African continent.
Yes, so over the years, the issue of insecurity has imploded, if I'll call it, say that way. If you look at from the Sahel down to our region, the West African sub-region, you find out that there has been an increased insecurity, incidences of attacks, jihadist movements, and so on and so forth. A lot of it is traced to the issue of Libya, or the fall of Libya, but then also with other local peculiarities. And also the defeat of ISIS in the Arab world, and so on. So you find out that, but then there were the root causes that were already existing. So those, the jihadis and so on, or the fighters from either Libya or other parts of the world, just help to kind of fuel what was already existing. So until we look at those root causes and find an inclusive way of solving this that involves both kinetic and non-kinetic, and addressing the root causes, I think we are in a situation whereby the incidences of insecurity and so on are going to continue for quite some time.
All right. Well, what are the lessons for Nigeria, in all of this? Is Nigeria immune to this? I mean, coup d'etats, we've had our fair share, looking at our history in terms of military juntas. So with recent happenings, what are the things that Nigeria should be doing?
So what we should be doing is what kind of looking at improve on what we're already doing in terms of kinetic use of means of suppressing these insurgencies and so on, and ensure that they do not take over or they do not overwhelm the government security forces. That's one. But also is to look at the issues, the underlying issues that are causing this all across. If you look at it from one region to the other, they might be different, the manifestations might be different, but they are all similar. Is issue of poverty, incidences of poverty, issues of lack of education, lack of or literacy level, those basic things. So you find out that the government must continue to do its best or improve on what it's doing in trying to solve the underlying or the root causes of these issues.
All right, well, let's take a look at some more stories on the update. Sudanese pro-military demonstrators have taken to the streets of the capital, Khartoum, to protest against the United Nations attempting to resolve a political crisis that has been marred by a wave of bloody protest since a military coup in October. An AFP news agency reporter said that the thousands rallied on Wednesday outside the office of UNITAMS, the United Nations mission, which launched talks with Sudanese factions this month. Sudan has been in turmoil since military leader Abdel Fattah al-Burhan seized power on October 25th, now shattering the country's fragile transition towards democracy. It put an end to a shaky power-sharing agreement between the military and civilian leaders that had been negotiated after a popular uprising deposed three-decade ruler Omar al-Bashir. Now, let's get some more perspectives on this. We'll join Wing Commander Musa Salmanu, retired former United Nations expert on mission, to give us perspectives on this. Well, apparently, I mean, the United Nations is an international diplomacy body that, engage in such conflict resolutions. But we have seen a pushback, by civilian population in Sudan. What do you think that is, causing this?
So there could be so many factors. One, there is an increasing feeling that the United Nations is failing or is reactive in the way it settles it settles issues. So there is that lack of trust amongst citizens or amongst countries, especially in Africa, because if you look at and they give examples of where the United Nations comes in, you find out that most of those negotiated settlements, for example, they feel that it gives so much to people that they feel shouldn't get, like the belligerents, or they feel that the missions spend so much and achieve so little. Whether this is true or not, that is the feeling in most of those places. If you go to some of these missions and you try to sound out the everyday citizen, there is that feeling that these missions are too expensive and achieve less. And when they come in, they rather prolong the situations. And what people, some of these locals, whether rightly or wrongly, feel that is in the interest of the United Nations itself and not necessarily the countries or the locals. This is a perception, whether right or wrong. It behoves on the United Nations as a multilateral organization and as an organization of last resort in terms of peace and security to actually look into this and to also kind of have confidence-building measures or other confidence-building measures that bring back that trust from the people.
Okay. All right. Now let's look at the role of regional blocs, such as the African Union and the ECOWAS and all of that. Where does this leave, these regional blocs? Are they demonstrating enough leadership, to contain some of these crises?
So a lot of this, and it depends on the region these regional blocs. Let's start from the African Union down to the regional, sub-regional blocs like ECOWAS and so on. Some are very weak, and some are very reactive or react very late to circumstances or situations, and some are even in a way non-existent. I mean, if you look at it, what people are saying is that these countries or these regional organizations should come in long before situations deteriorate this far. But a lot of these citizens clamor is that the regional organizations should prevail, for example, on leadership, on dictators, for example, or on presidents that want to have constitutional change, for example, to extend their terms. I know there are provisions, for example, in ECOWAS that ensures that presidents must respect constitutional term limits. But you find out that the response of these regional organizations are almost always too little, too late. And this brings a lot of frustration, and people over the years do not trust them to solve these issues.
All right, well, thank you so much for coming on Africa Update and sharing your thoughts with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
That was Wing Commander Musa Salmanu, retired former United Nations expert on mission, joining us on Africa Update. Let's take a look at some more stories now. Now, hundreds of militiamen who heeded government calls to lay down their weapons in war-torn eastern Republic of Congo have become so disillusioned with life in their sordid cantonment, they are returning to the bush. Having given up guns for peace, we had expected to be well treated, says Tumaini Bovundi, who fought with the Hutu militia in Yauturu. Scores of armed groups have long roamed the mineral-rich east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, a legacy of regional conflict that fled a quarter-century ago. Ethiopia's cabinet on Wednesday approved the lifting of a 6-month state of emergency ahead of its expiration in light of changing security conditions in the country, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's office said in a statement. Ethiopia declared the state of emergency in November after forces from the northern region of Tigray said that they had gained territory and were considering marching on the capital, Addis Ababa. The government said last month the army was clearing the Tigrayan forces from the northern Amhara and Afar regions, dismissing Tigrayan statements that their forces were retreating voluntarily to create an opening for peace. That statement came amid diplomatic efforts to end conflict that broke out in November 2020 and has displaced millions and triggered widespread hunger. Malawi's President Lazarus Chakwera has appointed several new ministers in a rejigged cabinet, a statement from his office showed after the old cabinet was dissolved over corruption scandals. Chakwera dissolved his entire cabinet this week, saying some ministers as well as other public officials had to account for graft accusations made against them. Chakwera's office said more appointments will be made soon. In a separate statement, Chakwera declared a state of disaster over Tropical Storm Anna, which caused heavy rains and flooding in the south of the country and triggered major power cuts. You're watching Africa Update, and still ahead. At least 8 fans died and 38 people were injured in a stampede at the Yaoundé Olembe Stadium in Cameroon. Join us again for details after this break. Thanks for staying. You're watching Africa Update, and here's another look at the top stories again. Junta spree in Africa as Burkina Faso comes under the gun in latest coup. Ethiopia's cabinet on Wednesday approved the lifting of a 6-month state of emergency ahead of its expiration in light of changing security conditions in the country. And in other news, tropical storm Anna has killed 34 people in Madagascar and 2 in Mozambique and left most of Malawi without power in recent days, according to reports released by authorities in the 3 countries. The storm, which formed in the east of the large island of Madagascar, triggered heavy rains that caused flooding and landslides in the capital, Antananarivo. After crossing the Indian Ocean, Anna's heavy rains hit northern and central Mozambique. 2 people were killed and 49 injured in Zambezia province, according to the Mozambican National Risk Management Institute. The Mozambican government and UN agencies estimate that 500,000 people will be affected by Anna in the provinces of Nampula, Zambezia, and Sofala. In a similar vein, at least 13 people have been killed in a huge explosion near a mining town in southwestern Ghana, officials said. A truck carrying explosives to a gold mine crashed with a motorcycle near the town of Bogoso, according to police. Many houses have been completely flattened, leaving at least 380 people without shelter. The impact of the explosion has left a crater on the major highway, forcing the police to divert traffic. Local police commander William Jabialu said that number of confirmed deaths had been revised down to 13 from a previous toll of 17. He said another 45 were being treated in local hospitals. Over now in Cameroon, at least 8 fans died and 38 people were injured in a stampede at the Yaoundé Olembe Stadium in Cameroon before the host nation's round of 16 game in the Africa Cup of Nations against Comoros, the government said in a statement. Images shared on social media, which Reuters could not immediately authenticate, showed screaming fans being crushed at an entrance gate. The Confederation of African Football, the continent's soccer government body, said in a statement that it was investigating following a low turnout in the first round games at brand new stadiums built for the continent's premier men's soccer tournament. Cameroon authorities have thrown open stadium gates, organized mass transit, and given out free tickets to lure fans. Now, Sudanese authorities released 9 Doctors Without Borders Medicine Sans Frontières staff members, the medical aid group said in a statement. The staff members were arrested in Khartoum on Monday on their way back to their office from a local hospital. The group's emergency medical teams are working with health authorities in Khartoum to treat COVID-19 patients as well as protesters hurt in recent anti-military demonstrations, the statement added. The Central Committee for Sudanese Doctors had said on Monday that Sudanese and non-Sudanese members of the group were arrested at the time. Namibia's High Court ruled against 2 gay couples fighting for recognition of their marriages, with the judge saying she agreed with them but was bound by the nation's prohibition of same-sex relations. Like Namibia, many other African nations still ban same-sex liaisons, with couples risking jail and public scorn. Daniel de Gashu and Johan Protector had married in South Africa and Annette Sele Lilies in Germany, but both couples now live in Namibia. De Gashu, a South African and German-born Anita Sele Lilies, had applications for a work permit and residency denied respectively based off their same-sex marital status. In court, they argued that the word spouse in Namibia immigration law should include same-sex couples or the clause be declared unconstitutional. Judge Haneli Prinsloo said she agreed but was bound by a more than 20-year-old Supreme Court ruling saying Namibia does not recognize same-sex relationships. The United Arab Emirates will lift an entry and transit ban on Saturday on travelers who had recently visited South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and 8 other African countries. The National Emergency Crisis and Disasters Emergency Management Authority said it was lifting the ban on those who had visited certain African countries in the previous 14 days imposed due to the Omicron COVID-19 variant. The other countries are Tanzania, Republic of Congo, Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, Mozambique, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. Those traveling from African countries will have to obtain a negative COVID-19 PCR test 48 hours prior to their departure and a negative rapid PCR test at the departure airport. Passengers will also be tested on arrival. Those traveling from Uganda, Ghana, and Rwanda will also have to take the 3 tests. The changes come into effect at 2:30 p.m. Saturday. Let's take a look at some humanitarian crisis. Spain's Sea Rescue Service on Wednesday picked up more than 300 migrants trying to reach the Conakry Islands in rickety boats, with 9 of them clinging to a semi-sunken dinghy. The rescue service said it was unaware of any drownings, as reported by a rights group. Helena Maleno, founder of the Working Borders Migration Monitoring Group, said 18 people had died trying to make the perilous crossing to the island of Lanzarote from Africa. Reuters could not confirm that figure independently. The rescue service said on its Twitter account 319 migrants were rescued off 6 boats, including one carrying as many as 120 people, and were taken to Lanzarote and Gran Canaria. Now, South Africa has the unenviable reputation of having some of the world's highest levels of violence against women. More than 100 rapes are reported daily, while on average a woman is murdered every 3 hours, according to official data. President Cyril Ramaphosa regularly characterizes violence targeted at women as a second pandemic after COVID-19. Now, with that, we've come to the end of Africa Update for the week. Join us again next week for another time on the program. You can also connect with us via our social media handles and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. I am Ayuba Ilia. Thank you for watching.